When I was diagnosed with cancer, it felt like my whole world came tumbling down.
Patient Advocate Foundation is here for you, providing free one-on-one practical support to patients with a cancer diagnosis. Call us at 800-532-5274. Patient Advocate Foundation can assist in navigating disability benefits and health insurance options. PAF also helps in accessing vital services, medications, and financial resources for both medical and household expenses. Visit patientadvocate.org or call 800-532-5274.
When I was diagnosed with cancer, it felt like my whole world came tumbling down.
Patient Advocate Foundation is here for you, providing free one-on-one practical support to patients with a cancer diagnosis. Call us at 800-532-5274. Patient Advocate Foundation can assist in navigating disability benefits and health insurance options. PAF also helps in accessing vital services, medications, and financial resources for both medical and household expenses. Visit patientadvocate.org or call 800-532-5274.
This UBI thing then, we'll talk about this in the Iberian FM phone-in a minute. I've got a great blog piece to read it out about it. It's a reflection on UBI. You might have a comment on this. You were talking a little bit about money supply. And of course, the United States have just burst through the debt ceiling. And I was saying they've gone so far out the debt ceiling, they're coming back in through the basement, aren't they, at some point? What do you make of this UBI thing in the American economy? It just keeps going, doesn't it? They just keep printing more and more money.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into the politics of it.
I couldn't draw you there. Okay, fair enough.
I liked your comment about somebody being a dad, and it's like, yeah, you could give your growing children, an allowance of 100 euros a week or something, but I don't think they'd be spending it that wisely.
It's true. Yeah. Some do, some don't. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so you have to teach a person how to use and value something like money. It's not just for candy and what was it, strawberry straws or something.
The gummy bear acid straws. Yeah, Mrs. Mem keeps telling me not to buy those, but I just can't help it, John.
Yeah, I mean, we had a discussion some months back about money and where it came from, or how it came about and what its definitions are. But basically it's a medium of change and a unit of storage of value. And so there's a number of different things that can affect that and can affect its value. So if there's all of a sudden a unlimited supply of it, it no longer has the same value, becomes devalued. And so same thing with, you give a lot of something to somebody that is something that's supposed to be valuable. Well, to that person, it no longer becomes valuable because it's plentiful.
And is that how you see UBI going potentially? Is if you just
no, not necessarily. I'm just saying it depends on how it's done, right? Somebody was saying, in smaller increments, like you don't just simply give, a huge lump sum to somebody. In the U.S. presently, there's big discussions about reparations, and I'm not going to go into the sides of that, but when you're talking about, we want $52 trillion and we want every person to get 11 million, and just it's like
just to put
that's
this
not
right,
going to work. You're talking about blah blah blah. You're not actually talking reality. And so if we're talking UBI in a way that would be actually workable, sustainable, and not abused, and something that can allow somebody to gain dignity and a means of a transition to finding good employment, then by all means. But maybe it would be in small increments, weekly, on a way that where they're taught how to budget and how to save and given basic lessons on financial literacy and things like that. But if you just say, okay, right, we're just going to give them a shovel load of cash and just say, have a good time. Well, that doesn't solve anything.
It probably doesn't, does it? Again, what it might solve, I guess, would be very temporary, and it's without context. I suppose that's the point here, isn't it? If you don't create a context in which these systems might make sense, you could end up with an unholy situations, I guess, as well. And I would question the motives. These things will inevitably come through governments, won't they? And governments have their own motives for giving people money usually as well, don't they? So there will be that aspect to it as well. I don't suppose the government have any incentive in teaching people how to be financially literate, do they? For one,
well, they don't really have an incentive to teach people to be independent and no longer in need of the government.
Quite.
Then that kind of defeats the purpose of being the government.
Yes.
Because the whole point of government is to maintain power and control.
Govern. It's in the name, isn't it?
Yeah. So if you give people the ability to no longer need you, then that might be the way of proper parenting. That's what we want to do. We want to teach our children to not need us.
Yes.
But if our goal as a parent is to maintain control of your child and for their entire life and make them dependent on you, well, then you'd parent in a different way.
Very interesting to use those analogies there of paternalistic and maternalistic models of government. Look, by Randy, always appreciate Joël Denort's view on all things. How about that's a great review and validation this morning, isn't it? And James is saying it's the old give a fish, teach to fish idea. Absolutely is, isn't it? And so interesting times with the advent, possibly. They're trialing it in the United Kingdom, giving people 1,600 British pounds a month, I think, and seeing how that goes. It's going to be fascinating.
Well, I'd be interested in what else are they giving? Are they giving any education with it? Are they requiring financial literacy training as part of that? Or are they just simply giving money?
My darkest fear is that you'll be promising not to go outside your 15-minute city in return for the money. Anyway, that's just my jaundiced view of it. John, as Barandi says, it's always great to hear from you. You're celebrating your love of the north of Portugal, your worldview as well. Talking of your love of Portugal and the worldview, here's some more. This will be a view of the River Lima, Ponte Lima there, and you can see the old women's prison. Where some would have ended up in probably again with financial difficulties. That's often the reason why women end up in prison, isn't it? It's because
that's my background.
That is. Have you got the same one there? Oh, yes, it's the same picture that you've got there. Beautiful. And of course, talking of the Romans, as we were before, that's the leader, isn't it?
That's union. General Brutus Gaius. I'm saying it in a Portuguese accent. Brutus Gaius, something or other.
Oh, that is actually his name. Sorry, I thought if I can just make up Roman names at will, can't you? Like Brutus Maximus Gaius.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
UBIus. Looking out, and there's a lovely contrast there, isn't there? Of the sort of modern plastic boats on the water. And
maybe the legionnaires, rather than wading across, took those kayaks. I think that would have been a little bit more convenient.
That would make such a better story, wouldn't it? So, John, loved Pam and all our friends in the north of Portugal. Here's Mrs. M to say hello.
Hey, Mrs. M, love you.
Honoured here with the presence of Mrs. M on the screen. Cheers, John. Thank you so much. We'll talk more about UBI now. All the best. Love to everybody up there. Ciao, ciao. See you, mate. Bye for now. Excellent. Then there we had Tony Time, Antonio Barbosa. Check him out at infinite-solutions.pt, and John there with his sharing his love of the North and a bit of his worldview as well. Agree with you, by Randy. Always great to talk to. He's another voice of reason, isn't he? He's our American voice of reason, I would say. We've got Garvo, the British voice of reason, and there's Joël Denort for you there, joining us every month. What is this, Mrs. M? Is it the first or the second Tuesday of the month? I'm not
First.
sure. It's got to be, isn't it?
It's the first.
Thank God you're an astrologer, and is your knee
manage
all right?
I can manage a diary as well.
And you thank goodness you can manage a diary. Well done. Okay, UBI then. A very interesting thing. Now, that Mrs. Emma's put her fader up like she's really ready to speak on this matter.
Yeah,
Is that right?
I really want to hear the considered piece that somebody sent you.
All right,
That's got
good.
my interest.
Okay.
And I have a few suspicions as to what might be going on, but I don't know. I'm really open-minded. I do have some thoughts for sure.
All right, here's an essay then, and we welcome this. We are a snakeskin photo. We can't move on until we've had a look at the snakeskin photo. And if I say to you that Owen discovered his snake in the herb patch, that does conjure up quite an image, doesn't it? But it's it's a true story. He did see he found a great big snakeskin in the herb patch yesterday. So I need to just show you that before we talk about it. Do you think is there a connection between snakes and UBI? We'll find out, won't we? Let's have a look.
There is.
The snake in the grass of UBI. But this is the what Owen discovered yesterday, I believe, in his herb patch. Just coming through now and sent to us on 913-590-303. Got some weird comments yesterday from somebody in Colorado who said, "Are you live now? We're trying to comment on the show." We broadcast in the mornings. I can't remember what your name was. Send us a message on that number and we'll play it for you. I'm doing my best to be here as often as possible. I'm sorry it didn't work out for you. There's the snakeskin. It's a thing of beauty, that, isn't it? Not enough to make a handbag or pair of
no, but it's beautiful,
sneakers.
isn't it?
That's loafers, snakeskin loafers from, but it is beautiful in its own way. And that would have some people absolutely having their flesh creep right now, and the analogy being made between politicians and snakes already. We haven't even started reading about UBI yet. So what I'm saying is if you've got an essay or a blog of this kind that's a conversation starter, very glad to share it. And you don't have to all phone in today. Our conversations can be ongoing. We like the long form here. We're an ongoing community. You don't have to sort of do chapter and verse and case closed mic drop like people tend to want to do on phone-ins and TV shows and so on. Susie's on the way to...
You know what? It's not a conversation, is it, actually, if it stops? Like a conversation is, by its very nature, ongoing.
That's right. I saw a fellow, the Kung Fu medic,
he's
do
great.
a brilliant rant on Twitter yesterday, which he took down because he said he'd come out with some wrong information during his rant. I sent him a message saying, Suze, have a great day, by the way, in Porto car shopping on a road trip with Baddie. That would make a great movie, wouldn't it? Road trip with Baddie. The Kung Fu medic. We do make mistakes, especially when we're excited and emotional and wanting to get something off our chest. And I think it's right to be assessed not on everything you say, but over the long term. Not to have your words cherry picked and sand-bitten. And to be used against you by unworthy assassins. But, let's keep talking to each other, for goodness sakes. Global Nobles here. Bon dia todos. Good morning to you, Global Nobles. Lovely to have you here joining us just as we read this about UBI this morning. So it's called Guns or Butter. I am not a communist, it begins, and certainly do not subscribe to UBI, which, in case you're wondering, what are they talking about? Isn't that guy who watches the Good Morning Portugal show, Ubi? No, this is UBI, Universal Basic Income. However, continues this writer, neither do I subscribe to the diversion of the commonwealth into the hands of the few at the expense of the many. Now, there's something we can recognise at the moment, right?
Yeah, and I think we could probably all agree with that, most likely.
Unless you're one of the few.
Yeah.
Nonsense. It's all an equal opportunity. You're just sour because you're not getting your share of the wealth. The world, more specifically Western nations, and forgive me, writer, author of this piece, I will be interjecting, as I'm sure Mrs. M will be too. The world, more specifically Western nations, have sufficient surplus wealth to provide free water, electricity and bread, just as we enjoy free air and free sunlight. And that's what I was getting at. That is real UBI, isn't it? We do have sufficient unto the day, the gifts of life, breath, light, and there's enough to go around for people. What this writer is not happy about, after free water, electricity, bread, air, and sunlight, is this is not a call for communism. It's a call for re-establishing the basics of any society which would call itself civilized. Unfortunately, we instead have, and in brackets have always had, venally corrupt leaders, venally corrupt leaders, vested political interest, and the influence which can be bought with accumulated wealth. In aggregate, people are not nice, says this writer. Humans are a vicious, nasty, and self-serving bunch of animals, and we are all humans and would each behave just as badly were we sitting at the top of the pile. Discuss in brackets. We'd like to think not, wouldn't we? But he might be right, of course, or she. This is why we have laws. And when the justice system itself is corrupted, then society itself unravels into might is right and the survival of the richest. Survival of the richest. In the UK, we no longer have legal aid in any meaningful sense, whilst in the USA, legal process has been politicized and replaced by plea bargains. This is not a civilization. It is a law of the jungle. Give us a principled legal system applied fairly, consistently, and above all, predictably, and you won't need UBI. In my third year at university, I did my jurisprudence thesis on the nature of property. In brief, I believe that ownership of property leads inevitably to warfare because property is, by its very nature, not the right to enjoy something, but the right to deny someone else the right to enjoy it. I own leasehold flats, and ultimately the freeholder will get the properties back. But until then, I let them out to tenants. The tenants may invite guests over for dinner or be burgled by uninvited guests. The physical building is none the wiser for any of these little charades we play around it. And at the end of the day, the real power lies in who has their hands on the front door key and can thereby keep all the others out, even if they themselves are not at home. I trace this back to a Roman religious ceremony which gave rise to the Roman civil process of mancipatio. I hope that I've made sense of that and pronounced that correctly, whereby title to slaves, real estate, and other key assets was transferred. The magic in this ancient ritual lives on today every time with a key press on the till in your local supermarket results in a beep sound or a bell dings when the cash register opens. That is interesting, isn't it? You're no longer a shoplifter, potentially. You are the owner because somebody's hit the right button on a till and a transaction has taken place. And the ritual acted out in the process of mancipatio is and was one of assertion. This is not yours. Property is not theft in the Marxist sense. Property is the right to deny, the right to exclude, the right to impoverish. And for this reason, my personal preference would be to see the removal of property status from basic essentials such as food, heating, and housing. That's an interesting thought, isn't it? What an erudite bunch we are, the Gumpers here. These should be provided or at least heavily subsidized by the state. Ask your mum about the housing supply. Something like 80%, for example, in Singapore, is either owned or was built by the government. That's interesting, isn't it? So you think of a super capitalist state like Singapore, 80% there of the housing supply built by the government, perhaps, or is either owned or was built by the government. Actually, in my opinion, Singapore is the last remaining genuinely Soviet state. Isn't that interesting? Says this writer. But that is a rant for another day and is more about state-owned businesses and military service. Anyhow, forget UBI, give them a council house, an allotment, free school meals, and 1 or 2 lucky breaks, and people will sort themselves out. At least that's the formula that worked for me in the 1960s. That's very sweet, isn't it? Blending personal experience and some academic knowledge there. Thank you very much for that, writer of that blog piece, and a wonderful thing to share, as we are happy to do on the Iberian FM phone-in as a little bit of food for thought there. We can leave it there, Mrs. M, because I know you want to get on into the studio, but I think you might have 1 or 2 things to say about the UBI.
Well, no, because I haven't actually read up about what it consists of.
Right. Our conversation this morning was that without context, and if you just give money without context or any other things to go with it, i.e. like financial literacy, you might just be exacerbating some of the problems we already have in society.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I remember quite bitterly how the government was giving out sort of family allowance and things like that. And
upon which people become dependent as their formula for living.
Well, just how they calculated it. And then all of a sudden, without you knowing, you find out that it's about to be taken back.
Family credit,
Yeah, like giving out giving out money, but then saying, "Oh, hang on a sec, you've had too much. We need to take it back."
Okay,
which
is fair enough, though, isn't it? But...
well, fair enough, but I don't think it was done in a very transparent and understandable way. In the same way as if they're giving out this money, it needs to be put into some context that people understand. So I don't know enough about what's being proposed.
You soon will.
I suspect, just because I'm a bit on the cynical side, I suspect will be made to pay for it in some way, shape, or form. Are
you connecting possibly lockdown and control of people?
Yes, I am. Absolutely. Right, okay. I do think what we've been through over the last few years was almost like a soft launch.
Foreplay, you might call it.
Yeah, well.
For a deviant sexual future.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know who it was titillating necessarily.
I don't want to know either.
I didn't get particularly turned on by it.
No.
I did get aroused, but in a kind of like my soul got
angry.
Okay. Something inside me roused up, so it was quite useful from that perspective. But,
right.
I suspect that what's going on in, like Pete mentioned, it had been very successful in Africa.
Yep.
I've heard of different countries proposing it. I suspect there'll be something like that coming to Europe at some point, sort of couched as a soft launch. Let's just try it out. And then when it comes back and everyone's already got used to it, it will come with a ton of conditions. For instance, that it has to be online, has to be attached to a mobile phone, has to be
digital
attached.
Currency.
Yeah, it has to be attached to social credit scoring, which on one level sounds really great.
Hold on a minute.
What? Which on one level sounds fantastic because everyone's going to behave really nicely, but by whose standards?
Oh, I see. Coming back to our contribution there.
Yeah.
If people can't behave nicely, we can incentivize them to do it with this new system.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And by behave nicely, that could bearing in mind.
Decides?
Wow, the UN probably, because the UN recently has been. I think a lot of countries have just recently signed over their rights to govern their countries. If the UN calls...
Are we talking about the UN or the WHO?
Oh, it might be the WHO. One of them. They're kind of interchangeable from my perspective.
Yeah.
But there has been some kind of treaty put in place so that if a pandemic is called, everyone who signed up has to take their governance from the WHO or the UN or whoever the.
But at least you'll have some digital currency in your wallet.
No, but you'll have a mandated. You have a mandated, stated this is what has to happen, and I suspect that will be all tied in and sewn
incentivized,
up.
possibly.
Yes, maybe incentivized is the way forward. I mean, the thing is, I've been reading up about like the idea of 2030. Initially it was 2012 and then the documents went to 2020 and 2021 and 2030. So there have been revised proposals for a new world order.
This is part of a plan. This is all sounding very conspiracy theory right now.
Well, no, I mean, you have to think about it. Like, our kids, they know our governance on a day-to-day level, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
They probably don't have an idea of what our long-term aims are. And similarly, governments see us like little kids that need to be done to, because they would ruin it if they did it themselves.
And it would be irresponsible for them not to have forward plans for the future of humanity.
So, but I mean, like their forward plans are much more extensive than our kind of rough, let's put a finger on a map and this might be where we are in 5 years. Okay. Their plan is very, I suspect, is very, it's long term, which, like I posted something about Brexit a couple of days ago. I don't think it actually made much difference whether we Brexited or remained, because ultimately the people who really hold the strings to everything, they'll get their way anyway.
Again,
it might just be
piece that we heard,
it might just be a small deviation, which to the likes of you and I and people, well, not really for us, hasn't affected us, but for people who are coming backwards and forwards in their retirement, expecting to make that easy, for it to be easy, they'll be struggling with that.
Well, yeah, and it keeps people fighting each other, doesn't it?
Exactly.
All right.
But anyway,
well done, government.
So yeah, I do suspect there's something a little like that going on.
Right.
I don't know for sure. I'm not well researched.
Well, we'll keep an eye on it.
I really liked that treaty that you put out there. I do suspect, and this has been spoken about in different areas, that there will be an air tax at some point.
That used to be just a thing that was people made jokes about in the 70s.
Do you know
They're
what?
going to start taxing air. How do you mean?
Well, if people, that's a good point. But given that water is such a commodity, we need it to survive, and that, like Nestle, for instance, has fought for the rights for even people's catchment. So where people have actually collected their own water, Nestle in the US has sued them.
Well, you mustn't interfere with the company's profits in that way.
Because what they're catching doesn't go back into the rivers that Nestle believe they own.
Harms their financial future.
Well, there's nothing to say that same way of profiteering can't be addressed and attached to air. If you think about it, people are putting forwards like the idea of carbon tax, and that just by the mere effects of living and going about your day-to-day business, you're affecting the collective. They could say the same about air. And the recent things that Trudeau's government have been talking about, making it easier to euthanize a homeless person because they can't afford to look after themselves and the state don't want to do it. Obviously, they have their own choice.
Mrs. M, you're turning into one of those callers into a phone-in.
Oh, sorry.
That hijacks the original topic.
Yes, my apologies.
To talk about other things.
I do think what this person, unnamed person that wrote that lovely treatise.
Yes.
I think, when they spoke about air and water, they've got a point. Like every other creature on this planet, apart from the ones that we look after, they live freely.
They live freely. That's why we love looking at them, isn't it?
Yeah,
that used to be us.
The butterflies, the bees, they all do their own little work in their own little way. They're born knowing who they are. That's the funny thing, isn't it? And yet us humans don't seem to know that, which is weird.
Therein lies the possibility of another debate. Who are we? What are we? And what are we doing?
And
here?
I have to say, I don't quite agree with the idea of self-serving animals. Like, are we?
Yeah,
I do think we are
I
self-serving.
didn't really like hearing that.
I do think we are self-serving, but I think that's because we've been raised in that way.
Yes.
I am much more hopeful for humanity when we start working together.
At which point some listeners will be saying, "Oh, bless," and others will be saying, "Yay, right on! We're so much better than we're currently."
I think we really are, and I think what we hear in the media is, and in the news, is just deliberately pitted to depress us and make us doubt each other.
Okay, finally.
So there you go. That's my 2 penny.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for our main contributor this morning. That was excellent. IKEA now offers legal services should you need them, but you have to build your own case.
That's very good.
And if a bit of life advice to finish with, thank you to T-Duck for this. Have a successful day-to-day, T-Duck. If a telemarketer calls, give the phone to your 4-year-old and tell them it's Santa.
Very clever.
Good stuff. And we'll see you tomorrow. We'll be talking to Michael Heron and Bobby O'Reilly tomorrow. And actually, to answer your question earlier on, Steve, there will be a meetup in San Martino de Porto, but I won't be at it. I'm making my way to Lisbon tomorrow. So join us for Ask Anything About Portugal Wednesday on the Good Morning Portugal show tomorrow from 8:30. And I'm looking forward to going into the big city tomorrow. Have a great day.
It's going to be good, isn't it?
Yeah, it's going to be wonderful. Have a great day, everyone. And we'll see you tomorrow for a bit more malarkey and those things that make you go, moments as well on the Iberian FM phone-in perhaps as well. Ciao.
At Grainger, we're for the ones who specialize in saving the day and for the ones who've mastered the art of keeping business moving. We offer industrial-grade supplies for every industry with same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders, all backed by real people ready to help. So you can get the right answers and products right when you need them. Call, clickgrainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Okay, round 2. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right. ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.